On a cold December night in 1996, the city of Boulder, Colorado, fell under a darkness far deeper than the winter chill. Inside the Ramsey family's grand home, Christmas lights still twinkled, and presents lay scattered under the tree. To neighbors and friends, the Ramseys embodied a picture-perfect American family. John, a successful businessman, Patsy, a socialite with Southern charm, 9-year-old Burke, and 6-year-old JonBenét, a blonde-haired beauty queen whose smile lit up every room she entered. But as the nation would soon discover, the magic of that holiday season would be shattered by a crime so haunting, so bizarre, that it would forever remain carved into the American psyche. In the early hours after Christmas, the joyful echoes of celebration were replaced with a chilling scream, a frantic call to police, and the discovery of a ransom note that would lead investigators down one of the most tangled paths in criminal history. By the time the day was done, JonBenét would be found murdered in her own home, sparking a case that even decades later still feels unsolved and unexplainable. The murder of JonBenét Ramsey was not just another crime. It became a national obsession. It was a story of innocence lost, of beauty pageants and wealth colliding with brutality and death. The case was riddled with contradictions, mishandled evidence, and unanswered questions. Television networks broadcast updates daily, tabloids sold millions of copies with sensational headlines, and experts debated endlessly about what had happened inside the Ramsey home that Christmas night. For the public, the tragedy was more than just the loss of a child. It became a mirror reflecting America's fascination with scandal, mystery, and privilege. How could something so horrific happen to a family that seemed to have everything? Why did every lead only bring more confusion? And why, after all the investigations, grand jury hearings, documentaries, and confessions, was no one ever convicted? These questions transformed the JonBenét Ramsey case into one of the most enduring mysteries in American history, ensuring that the little girl in the glittering pageant dresses would never be forgotten. The Ramseys were no ordinary family. John Ramsey was the president of Access Graphics, a computer company that had made him a wealthy man. Patsy Ramsey, a former beauty queen herself, had married into a life of comfort and privilege, devoting much of her energy to her children and her daughter's budding pageant career. JonBenét was the crown jewel of the household, a child with golden curls, sparkling blue eyes, and a winning smile. She had already achieved titles in child beauty competitions, captivating audiences with her presence. To the outside world, theirs was a life of affluence and stability, complete with a sprawling home in Boulder and memberships in elite social circles. Yet beneath the glittering surface, tensions lurked, pressures of wealth, demands of appearances, and the unique stress of raising a child so publicly adored. On Christmas Day of 1996, the Ramseys entertained, exchanged gifts, and shared laughter, unaware that by dawn, their lives would unravel beyond repair. The morning after Christmas began like no other. At around 5:30, Patsy Ramsey awoke and went downstairs to make coffee. On the staircase, she noticed a piece of paper. It was a ransom note scrawled across several pages demanding $118,000, 0 cents for the safe return of her daughter. The note was bizarrely specific. The amount almost exactly matched John Ramsey's recent bonus. Patsy panicked, rushing to her husband's side and calling the police. Officers quickly arrived, followed by friends and neighbors who came to support the family. The house was soon filled with people, contaminating the crime scene in ways investigators would later regret. The ransom note warned against contacting authorities, yet the Ramseys' actions, phoning friends and gathering supporters, blurred the line between desperate parents and suspicious actors. What should have been a carefully preserved crime scene became chaotic within hours, compromising evidence that might have provided crucial answers. The ransom note itself remains one of the most perplexing aspects of the case. At over 2.5 pages, it was unusually long for such a demand, filled with strange phrases and inconsistent tones. It demanded money in a theatrical voice, mixing movie-like references with odd statements, and it was written on paper from the Ramseys' own home using one of their pens. Handwriting experts examined it exhaustively, and while some pointed to similarities with Patsy's handwriting, conclusive proof never materialized. Investigators debated endlessly. Was the note written to stage a kidnapping that had already gone wrong? Was it the work of an intruder who panicked? Or was it an intentional misdirection created by someone inside the house? The strangeness of the note cast a shadow over every theory, leaving investigators torn between possibilities that seemed both plausible and impossible. Later that day, the unthinkable happened. While searching the house, John Ramsey ventured into the basement. Behind a door in a little-used room, he discovered his daughter's body. JonBenét lay lifeless, covered with a white blanket, with duct tape across her mouth and a garrote tied around her neck. The sight was horrifying. John lifted her body and carried her upstairs, collapsing in grief. But in doing so, he further disturbed the crime scene. For police, the discovery transformed the case from a kidnapping into a homicide. The ransom note now seemed less like a demand and more like a calculated deception. The tragedy of finding JonBenét in her own home beneath the same roof where her parents and brother slept raised an unbearable question. How could such violence occur without anyone hearing, seeing, or knowing? The Boulder Police Department, inexperienced with such a high-profile murder, made critical errors in the first 24 hours. Officers allowed friends to move through the house, destroyed the integrity of the scene, and failed to properly separate the family for questioning. Suspicion quickly fell on the Ramseys themselves. Investigation, their investigators noted inconsistencies in their statements, their seemingly controlled public appearances, and their unwillingness to fully cooperate without legal counsel. Yet others saw them as grieving parents, overwhelmed by media scrutiny and police suspicion. The clash between law enforcement and the Ramseys set the tone for the investigation, a battle of mistrust, accusation, and doubt that would stall the pursuit of justice for years. As news of the murder spread, the media descended on Boulder. Reporters camped outside the Ramsey home, tabloids ran lurid headlines, and the tragedy became a spectacle. JonBenét's beauty pageant photos, once cherished by her family, were splashed across covers, fueling debates about childhood exploitation and the eerie contrast between innocence and glamour. The Ramseys' every move was scrutinized, their behavior dissected on talk shows and in living rooms across America. Speaking of vigils, Candyman Lawa Toto. For the public, the case became more than an investigation. It was entertainment, horror, and drama all in one. The pressure to solve it mounted, but so did the divisions over what had truly happened in that house. The Ramseys' own behavior only deepened suspicion. Their decision to hire lawyers and public relations experts early on was seen by some as self-protection rather than cooperation. Patsy's emotional television interviews, where she pleaded for the killer to be found, were analyzed for signs of deceit. John's stoic demeanor fueled claims of coldness or concealment. Even Burke, the 9-year-old brother, became the subject of speculation, with theories suggesting a childhood accident covered up by desperate parents. The family's wealth and social standing made them both untouchable in some eyes and guilty in others, with the truth lost somewhere in between. One of the most persistent theories was that an intruder had entered the Ramsey home that night. A broken basement window, an unexplained footprint, and DNA evidence on JonBenét's clothing seemed to support this idea. Advocates of the intruder theory argued that the ransom note's theatrical style pointed to an outsider, and that the brutality of the crime was inconsistent with a family cover-up. Yet detractors noted the lack of forced entry, the suspiciously specific ransom amount, and the staging of the scene. The debate between intruder and inside job became the defining argument of the case, splitting not just investigators, but the entire nation. The opposing theory focused squarely on the family. Handwriting analysis suggested Patsy could not be ruled out as the ransom note's author. Some investigators believed Burke might have struck his sister during a quarrel, with the parents staging the scene to protect him. Others thought the evidence pointed to accidental death followed by a cover-up. Theories swirled endlessly, each more disturbing than the last. Yet none could be proven beyond doubt. The Ramseys maintained their innocence, insisting they had no role in JonBenét's death. Still, the shadows of suspicion never lifted from their lives. Forensic evidence only added to the confusion. The garrote, fashioned from a paintbrush handle belonging to Patsy, seemed both personal and deliberate. Duct tape and fibers raised questions about what occurred in JonBenét's final moments. DNA testing revealed foreign material on her clothing, yet contamination and limitations in testing left uncertainties. Experts debated whether the evidence pointed to sexual assault, staging, or a botched kidnapping. Each forensic clue seemed to open new doors rather than close them, deepening the mystery rather than solving it. The Ramseys' relationship with authorities deteriorated as the months dragged on. They hired private investigators, gave carefully controlled interviews, and resisted direct police questioning without legal protections. This defensive stance only fueled public suspicion. The case became not just a search for a killer, but a battle of narratives. The Ramseys insisting on their innocence, the police struggling to maintain credibility after early blunders, and the media amplifying every twist. In 1999, a grand jury was convened to examine the evidence. After months of deliberation, jurors voted to indict John and Patsy on charges of child abuse resulting in death and accessory to a crime. But the district attorney refused to sign the indictment, citing insufficient evidence for conviction. This decision effectively halted the legal case, leaving the question of guilt unresolved. For many, it felt like justice had slipped away, lost in legal maneuvering and the absence of irrefutable proof. The years that followed saw the case transformed into cultural mythology. Documentaries, books, and television specials revisited the evidence, often with conflicting conclusions. Each new angle reignited public fascination but brought no closure. Theories multiplied, with self-proclaimed experts and amateur sleuths dissecting every detail. The longer the case remained unsolved, the more it became less about truth and more about narrative. A story everyone knew, but no one could finish. Other suspects emerged, including drifters, neighbors, and even a man who falsely confessed to the crime years later. Each lead ended in disappointment, reinforcing the sense that the case was cursed with ambiguity. Even advances in DNA technology failed to deliver conclusive answers, with results sometimes ruling out suspects but never identifying a definitive killer. For JonBenét, the justice system seemed unable to deliver clarity, leaving her story frozen in time. As the years stretched into decades, the JonBenét Ramsey case became less about what happened that night and more about what it represented. It exposed the failures of law enforcement, the corrosive power of media, and the way privilege shaped perception of crime. It became a case study in how justice can falter when clouded by suspicion, error, and spectacle. And for the Ramsey family, it meant a lifetime of suspicion and grief, living under the shadow of a mystery they could never escape. Even today, nearly 3 decades later, the case lingers as one of America's most notorious unsolved murders. Every few years, new documentaries, podcasts, or reports resurface, promising fresh insight but rarely delivering closure. JonBenét remains frozen in photographs, a child forever 6 years old, her life reduced to a mystery too tangled to solve. The crime continues to haunt not just those who knew her, but an entire nation that feels complicit in its obsession. The legacy of the JonBenét Ramsey case is one of unanswered questions. Was it a family tragedy masked by lies, or a brutal act of a stranger who slipped away unseen? Why did justice never prevail in a case that seemed to have so much evidence, so much attention, and so much urgency? The lack of resolution has left an open wound in American true crime history, a reminder that not every mystery finds its ending. Beyond the crime itself, the cultural impact of JonBenét's murder has been profound. It reshaped true crime coverage, paving the way for sensationalized media spectacles. It sparked debates about childhood beauty pageants, privilege, and the role of public opinion in criminal investigations. And it revealed how a single tragedy could capture the nation's attention for decades, becoming both a cautionary tale and an enduring obsession. In the end, JonBenét's story is about more than her death. It is about the life she never had the chance to live. She was a child who loved to sing, dance, and dress up, who had a family that adored her despite the suspicions cast upon them. Her memory lives not only in crime documentaries and unsolved files, but also in the hearts of those who still hope for justice. Her case endures because it represents a universal longing, the desire to understand, to find truth, and to honor the life of a child whose smile once lit up a stage. Perhaps one day, With advances in forensic science or the courage of new witnesses, the answers will come. Until then, JonBenét Ramsey's name remains both a symbol of tragedy and a mystery that refuses to fade.